My father looked me dead in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "She's nothing but a disappointment, a complete waste of space." What he didn't know was that I owned the $750,000 house he was living in rent-free, and I just received the phone call that would make me $200,000 richer by month's end. By the time I was done, he'd be begging me to take him back. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled my father's comfortable little world piece by piece, I need you to understand something. For 28 years, I believed I was the problem. I was the daughter who worked too hard, cared too much about money, and somehow never measured up to my perfect sister Jessica, who had 3 kids and a husband but couldn't balance a checkbook to save her life. I'd been funding my parents' lifestyle for 4 years, paying every single bill while they treated me like their personal ATM with an attitude problem. But that Wednesday afternoon when I came home early from work, everything changed. I heard my father on what he thought was a private phone call, and the words that came out of his mouth shattered every illusion I'd ever held about my family. Within 7 days, I'd sold their home, transferred to another state, and left them scrambling to figure out how they'd survive without their cash cow. You want to know the beautiful part? They never saw it coming. My name is Sofia Rivera, and at 28, I had what most people would kill for. Every morning at 5:30, my alarm would pierce through the darkness of my luxury home in the Bellevue suburbs of Seattle. I'd force myself out of my king-sized bed, pull on my workout gear, and spend an hour in the fully equipped home gym I'd installed in the basement. Protein shake, scalding shower, and by 7:15 I was fighting traffic toward downtown Seattle and my office at Sterling Financial Advisors. To my colleagues, I was the poster child for millennial success. MBA from University of Washington, 4 promotions in 6 years, and a corner office with a view of Elliott Bay that made other analysts green with envy. My boss, Catherine Wells, had personally mentored me through every career milestone. "Sophia, you're the future of this company," she'd tell me during our monthly reviews. "Your analytical skills and client relationships are exactly what we need in leadership." What Catherine and everyone else didn't see was the second shift that started the moment I walked through my front door. 4 years ago, I'd purchased my dream home, a stunning 5-bedroom craftsman in an exclusive neighborhood valued at $750,000. I'd planned to live there alone, maybe eventually with a partner, building the independent life I'd worked so hard to achieve. Instead, 6 weeks after moving in, my parents, David and Linda Rivera, showed up with suitcases and sob stories. Dad's landscaping business had failed for the 3rd time in a decade, and they'd been evicted from their apartment. "Just until we get back on our feet, Mija," Mom had promised, tears streaming down her face. A few months at most. 4 years later, they were still there. 4 years of me paying the mortgage, utilities, groceries, their car payments, insurance, cell phone bills, and every other expense you could imagine. They contributed absolutely nothing, not even token amounts for household costs. Dad spent his days half-heartedly applying for jobs he never seemed to get, while Mom volunteered at church and met her friends for lunch 3 times a week like she was living in some kind of subsidized retirement community. But the real knife in my heart came every Tuesday when my sister Jessica would arrive for family dinner with her 3 kids and husband Brandon. Despite dropping out of college to get married at 21, despite never holding a job for more than 6 months, despite constantly needing money for her kids' activities and unexpected expenses, Jessica was the golden child. "There's our princess," Dad would beam whenever she walked through the door, wrapping her in the kind of embrace I hadn't received since I was 12. He'd spend the entire evening focused on her stories about the kids' school plays and soccer games, while barely acknowledging my presence even when I tried to share news about landing major clients or getting recognition at work. After these dinners, I'd escape to my home office to catch up on the work I'd missed during the forced family time, exhaustion settling into my bones like lead. The weight of supporting 5 people was crushing me, but I'd convinced myself this was what good daughters did. I was the successful one, after all. This was my responsibility. My best friend Maya Torres had watched this dynamic destroy me for years. "Sophia, "They're using you," she'd say during our rare coffee dates when I could steal time away from work and family obligations. "You're 28 years old, and you're supporting two able-bodied adults who should be supporting themselves, not the other way around." I'd give her the same defensive response every time. "They're my parents, Maya. Dad's business failed and Mom never had a career. What am I supposed to do, throw them out on the street?" Maya would just shake her head, knowing there was no point in arguing with someone who'd been conditioned from birth to believe her worth was measured by her utility to others. She'd known me since college, watched me achieve every goal I'd set for myself, only to hand over the rewards to family members who treated my success like their birthright. That Tuesday morning, I had the most important presentation of my career. A tech startup worth $50 million was looking for a new financial advisory firm, and Catherine had entrusted me with the lead. "Land this account, and we'll fast-track you to senior partner," she'd promised. At 28, I'd be the youngest senior partner in Sterling's history. As I straightened my blazer and checked my reflection one last time, I caught sight of Dad in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone while drinking the expensive coffee I bought every week. "Big presentation today, Dad," I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice despite his obvious disinterest. "This could change everything for my career." He barely glanced up from his screen. "That's nice, sweetheart. Good luck." I drove to work swallowing the familiar sting of indifference, telling myself that once I made senior partner, maybe then he'd finally be proud of me. Maybe then they'd all see that I wasn't just the family ATM with an attitude problem. The presentation exceeded every expectation I dared to have. The startup CEO asked probing questions that demonstrated they'd done their homework on our firm, and by the end, they were nodding along with my recommendations and timeline. Catherine caught my eye across the conference room and gave me a subtle thumbs up that made my heart race with excitement. "Miss Rivera," the CEO said as we wrapped up, shaking my hand with the kind of firmness that sealed deals, "you've clearly done exceptional work here. We'll have a decision by Friday, but I'll be honest, I can't imagine working with anyone else." After they left, Catherine pulled me aside with a grin that told me everything I needed to know. "That was masterful, Sophia. Take the rest of the day off. You've earned it. And start thinking about what kind of office you want, because I think we're going to be having a very different conversation next week." I practically floated out of the building, excitement bubbling in my chest like champagne. For the first time in months, I couldn't wait to get home and share good news with my family. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this massive career milestone would finally earn me the pride and recognition I'd been chasing my entire life. I checked my watch as I pulled into the driveway, 2:45 in the afternoon. They wouldn't be expecting me for hours, which meant I could surprise them with the news and maybe even suggest celebrating with dinner at that new restaurant downtown Dad had mentioned wanting to try. Both their cars were in the driveway, which struck me as odd since Mom usually had her book club on Wednesdays. I entered through the side door that led directly into the kitchen, planning to call out my surprise arrival and share my triumph. But then I heard Dad's voice carrying from his makeshift home office, the guest bedroom he'd claimed, and filled with his computer and construction magazines. He was clearly on a video call, his voice projecting the way he did when he was trying to impress someone. "Yeah, Robert, we're still living with her," he was saying to someone I recognized as Robert Chen, his old business partner. "What choice do we have? Housing market's insane these days." I was about to announce my presence when something in his tone made me pause at the bottom of the stairs. There was an edge to his voice, a casual dismissiveness that felt wrong. "Hold on, let me close this properly," Dad said. "Sophia's always nagging me about properly ending video calls instead of just hitting the red X." I heard a clicking sound, followed by Dad's voice again, but Robert's voice was still coming through the speakers, asking if he was still there. Dad had only minimized the window, thinking he'd disconnected the call. What came next destroyed me. "She's nothing, Robert, a complete disappointment, should have never been born." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the stair railing, my legs suddenly unsteady, unable to process what I was hearing from my own father's mouth. "Sure, she makes decent money, Dad continued, his voice dripping with contempt. But what kind of life is that? 28 and still single, married to her job like some corporate robot. It's pathetic, honestly. And she acts like we should be grateful she's letting us live in her precious house. At least you've got a roof over your head, Robert replied, his voice tinny through the computer speakers. Yeah, but at what cost to my dignity? Dad laughed bitterly. Do you know how humiliating it is when people ask what I do for work and I have to admit my daughter supports me? It's embarrassing. A real man doesn't live off his kid. What about Jessica? How's she doing? The immediate shift in Dad's tone was like watching someone flip a switch. Pride and warmth flooded his voice. Now there's my real success story. 3 beautiful grandkids, a solid marriage to Brandon. Sure, she didn't go to some fancy university like Sophia, but she's got what actually matters. A family, love, purpose. Brandon's construction business is doing well enough that they're looking at bigger houses. I heard Mom's voice joining the conversation as she entered Dad's room. Who are you talking to, David? Just Robert. We were catching up about the girls. Oh, good. Mom's voice grew conspiratorial as she moved closer to the computer. Did you tell him about Sophia's big presentation today? The one she won't stop talking about? Dad scoffed audibly. What's to tell? Another rung on the corporate ladder. Big deal. You know what I told Linda last night? The only good thing about living here is we're saving a fortune on rent and expenses. Another year or 2 of this, and we'll have enough saved to put a down payment on a nice place near Jessica and the grandkids. That's the dream, Mom agreed with a sigh that sounded almost wistful. I'm so tired of walking on eggshells around Sophia, pretending to be interested in her work stories and client meetings. Remember last Christmas when she gave us those expensive watches? Dad's laughter was cruel, like we needed a reminder of how much money she makes. So tactless. Jessica would never show off like that. My stomach lurched. Those watches had cost me $2,800. I'd spent weeks researching the perfect style for each of them, wanting to give them something meaningful that would last forever. Well, we'll just keep playing the game for now, Mom continued. She needs us more than we need her, even if she doesn't realize it. Without us, what does she have? No husband, no kids, just that awful friend Maya who keeps putting ideas in her head about boundaries and independence. True, Dad agreed. Remember when Maya convinced her to take that trip to Costa Rica instead of helping us with the kitchen renovation? Selfish, both of them. I'd canceled that trip at the last minute after Dad guilted me about needing help with the house projects. I'd lost the $3,000 deposit and used my vacation days to install new cabinets and tile the backsplash instead of lying on a beach in Manuel Antonio. The conversation continued, but I couldn't bear to hear more. My heart was pounding so violently I could feel it in my throat, and nausea was rising in waves. I backed away from the stairs as quietly as possible, grateful for the soft-soled flats I'd worn instead of my usual heels. Somehow, I made it back to my car without being detected. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition for several attempts. When I finally managed to start the engine, fragments of their conversation kept echoing in my mind like a broken record. Should have never been born. A complete disappointment. We're saving a fortune. Just keep playing the game. I don't remember driving to Maya's apartment downtown. I must have operated on pure muscle memory, following familiar routes while my mind tried to process 28 years of memories through this devastating new lens. The academic achievements that were met with distracted nods while Jessica's mediocre report cards went on the refrigerator. The college graduation party they left early because one of Jessica's kids had a soccer game. The countless loans that were never repaid. The sacrifices that were never acknowledged, the achievements that were dismissed as showing off. By the time I parked outside Maya's building, my shock had crystallized into something else, something cold and clear and absolutely certain. For the first time in my life, I saw my family exactly as they were, not as I desperately wanted them to be. Maya took one look at my face and pulled me inside without questions. I recounted the overheard conversation word for word while she paced her living room like a caged animal, her fury building with each detail. You need to confront them right now, she insisted, reaching for her car keys. I'll drive you back there myself. They need to know you heard every disgusting word. I shook my head, curling deeper into her couch. I can't go back there tonight. I can't look at them knowing what they really think of me. Maya sat beside me, taking my trembling hands. Then stay here as long as you need. We'll figure this out together. As the shock wore off, memories began surfacing. Moments I'd dismissed or rationalized away, now returning with painful clarity. Like the time I'd used my entire year-end bonus, $18,000, to pay off the remaining debts from Dad's failed landscaping business. He'd accepted the check with a casual "thanks, Mija," before immediately calling Jessica to discuss vacation plans for their family. Or the European vacation I'd planned and saved for over 2 years, postponed 3 times to cover family emergencies. First for Dad's back surgery, which somehow didn't prevent him from playing golf 2 weeks later. Second for Mom's fender bender that required a replacement car they couldn't afford. Third for Jessica's unexpected medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover her daughter's dental work. When I'd finally bought my house, the crown jewel of my achievements, they'd shown up 3 weeks later with suitcases and sob stories about their landlord selling the property. I'd given them the master bedroom with its ensuite bathroom, moving my belongings to the smaller guest room to accommodate them. My privacy, my space, my sanctuary, surrendered without question because that's what good daughters do. I've defended him so many times, I whispered to Maya, remembering conversations with colleagues who'd questioned Dad's repeated business failures. When people ask why he keeps going bankrupt, I make excuses. Bad economy, dishonest partners, bad luck. Because you're loyal, Maya said firmly. That's not a character flaw, Sophia. They're the ones with character flaws. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Incredible work today. Catherine is over the moon. Hope you're celebrating. I'd completely forgotten about the presentation, the reason I'd gone home early in the first place. The biggest success of my career seemed meaningless now, overshadowed by the revelation that had turned my world upside down. My whole identity has been built around being the good daughter, I said, the realization settling like a weight on my chest. The responsible one, the successful one, but they never wanted that. They wanted me to be Jessica. Maya snorted. Jessica, who's never held a steady job and whose husband supports the whole family? That Jessica? They don't see it that way. They see her kids, her marriage, the normal life I've never had because I've been too busy working to support everyone else. As night fell, I found myself scrolling through property laws on my phone, researching homeowner rights and tenant protections. The house was solely in my name. They had no legal claim to it, no right to stay if I asked them to leave. The thought sent a mixture of guilt and liberation coursing through my veins. The next morning, Maya used her connections to get me an emergency session with her therapist, Dr. Amanda Foster. After I recounted the previous day's events, Dr. Foster leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. What you're describing is a profound betrayal, she said. It's completely normal to feel disoriented, angry, even like you're grieving. You are grieving. You're mourning the parents you thought you had. I keep thinking I should confront them, I admitted. Make them understand how much they've hurt me. Would that give you what you need? I considered the question seriously. No, I finally said. They'd deny it or minimize it or somehow make it my fault. They always do. Then what would give you what you need? The answer came with surprising clarity. Freedom. I need to be free of them, of the obligation and guilt and the constant striving for approval I'm never going to get. And how might you achieve that freedom? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I found myself mentally calculating numbers, my savings, the house's current market value, the cost of starting over somewhere new, somewhere without the crushing weight of familial expectations. By the time I left Dr. Foster's office, a plan was forming. Not a confrontation, but an exit strategy. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of my anger or tears. I would simply remove myself from their equation as cleanly and completely as possible. That night, staying at Maya's again, I created a detailed spreadsheet of steps to take, calls to make, research to complete. By dawn, I had a comprehensive timeline mapped out for extracting myself from the life I'd built around people who'd never truly valued me. For once in my adult life, I would put myself first, and I wouldn't apologize for it. For the first time in my career, I called in sick the next morning. Catherine was understanding. "You've banked enough goodwill to take a month off if you needed," she said, though concern colored her voice. I assured her it was just a minor bug, nothing serious. The lie felt strange on my tongue, but deception was apparently easier than I'd thought. Maybe I'd learned from experts. My first call was to Marcus Thompson, my financial advisor. We'd worked together for 3 years as I built my investment portfolio, but I'd never heard the urgency in his voice that I detected when I explained I needed an emergency meeting. "I can see you at 10, he said. "Is everything all right, Sophia?" "It will be," I replied, surprised by my own certainty. Marcus's office occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel with panoramic views of Puget Sound. As I explained my situation, sanitized, without the emotional details, his expression remained professionally neutral. "So you want to liquidate investments to facilitate a relocation while simultaneously selling your current residence," he clarified. "Yes, I need to know how much I can access quickly without penalties and what the tax implications will be." He pulled up my accounts, typing rapidly. "You're in an excellent position. The market's been favorable, especially for Seattle real estate. What locations are you considering?" "Portland," I said. The decision had crystallized somewhere between Maya's apartment and his office. By the time I left Marcus's office, I had a clear picture of my financial standing and a referral to a real estate agent who specialized in quick sales for professionals needing discretion. Rebecca Walsh called before I'd reached my car. "I understand you're looking for a fast, discreet sale," she said without preamble. "I can assess your property this afternoon." "Not today," I replied quickly. "My parents are staying with me temporarily. Tomorrow morning would be better. They have standing breakfast plans with friends on Fridays." "Parents living with you?" Her tone shifted slightly. "Are they co-owners?" "No, the property is solely in my name." Good. That simplifies things considerably." My next call was to a Portland real estate agent recommended by Rebecca. Diana Kim specialized in relocating professionals and understood my need for speed and discretion. "I can start sending virtual tours today," she assured me. "Based on your budget and preferences, I already have several properties in mind." The lawyer came next. Patricia Hendricks, referred by a colleague who'd navigated a complex family situation. She confirmed what I already suspected. As the sole owner, I had every right to sell my property regardless of who was living there. "You'll need to provide proper notice if they refuse to leave voluntarily," she cautioned, "but given the circumstances, I doubt it will come to that." By mid-afternoon, the framework of my new life was taking shape. I drove back to my house, timing my arrival for when Mom would be at her weekly hair appointment. Dad was probably in the basement, tinkering with projects he never completed. I slipped into my bedroom and began methodically sorting through my possessions. Important documents went into a secure folder: birth certificate, passport, insurance policies, property deed. Jewelry and small valuables were packed into a carry-on suitcase I could easily transport. In the back of my closet, I found a box of childhood mementos I'd kept through multiple moves. Opening my old diary from age 13, I read an entry that made my stomach clench. "Dad missed my honor roll ceremony today. Mom said he was working, but I saw his truck at the golf course when Jessica and I drove past. Jessica got a new phone for getting a B in math. I got all A's again? But no one seemed to notice." Page after page documented small betrayals and moments of favoritism, recorded matter-of-factly by a child who'd accepted this treatment as normal. In another box, I found handmade gifts I'd created for my parents over the years: a painted picture frame for Dad's desk, a beaded jewelry box for Mom that had taken weeks to complete. Both items were dusty and unused, stored away rather than displayed. I was carefully replacing these boxes when my phone rang. "Jessica." "Hey, Soph, are you okay? Mom said you didn't come home last night." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Jessica and I had never been particularly close. The 6-year age gap and our parents' obvious favoritism had created a chasm between us. But she wasn't cruel, just self-absorbed in the way people can be when they've always been the center of attention. "I'm staying with Maya for a few days." I said finally, "I need some space." "Space from what? Did something happen?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Redmond, halfway between our respective locations. I wasn't ready to tell her everything, but I needed to gauge her reaction, to see if she'd been aware of our parents' true feelings about me. The cafe was busy enough to provide ambient noise for privacy, while offering enough witnesses to prevent a scene. Jessica arrived looking frazzled, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd always been the pretty one, the charming one, while I was designated the smart one, a distinction that had felt more like a consolation prize than a compliment. "What's going on?" she asked as soon as she sat down. "Mom's freaking out. She thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." "I'm selling the house," I said bluntly, watching her face carefully. Her eyes widened. "What? Why? You love that house." "I'm moving to Portland. I've already started the process." "Portland? But what about Mom and Dad? Where will they go?" There it was. Her first thought was for our parents, not for me. But there was genuine confusion in her expression, not calculation. "They'll figure it out," I said, keeping my voice steady. "They're adults. But they can't afford their own place right now. Dad's still looking for work, and Mom's never had a real job." "I'm aware," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "I've been supporting them completely for 4 years, paying the mortgage, utilities, groceries, everything. Did you know that?" She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I knew you were helping them out." "Helping implies they contribute something. They don't." Jessica fidgeted with her coffee cup. "Look, I would help if I could, but with 3 kids and Brandon's business just getting established." "I'm not asking you to help," I interrupted. "I'm telling you what's happening. I'm selling my house and moving away." "Because of Mom and Dad? Did they do something?" For a moment, I considered telling her everything, the overheard conversation, the years of dismissal and disrespect. But looking at her worried face, I realized she truly didn't know. She'd been shielded from the darker side of our parents, cushioned by their unconditional love and approval. "I need a change," I said instead. "The house will sell quickly. They'll need to find their own place." "They could stay with us temporarily," she offered, though without enthusiasm. "The spare room is small, but that's between you and them." I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "Sophia, wait," she called after me. "Are you okay? Really?" I turned back, surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. For a brief moment, I saw past the golden child persona to the sister who had once defended me when I'd accidentally broken Dad's coffee mug. "I will be," I answered honestly. That afternoon, I had a video interview with Cascade Financial in Portland, leveraging connections from a conference I'd attended 6 months earlier. The hiring manager, Michael Rodriguez, remembered me well. "We'd be fortunate to have someone with your expertise, Sophia. The senior analyst position just opened last month. Perfect timing." Perfect timing indeed, as if the universe was finally aligning to help me break free. My final call was to Catherine. I owed her professional courtesy at least. "Portland?" she repeated after I'd explained my situation. "That's unexpected. You know we have a satellite office there, not as large as Seattle, but growing rapidly. Would you consider a transfer instead of resignation?" The offer surprised me. "You'd help me transfer?" "Sophia, you're one of our top performers. I'd rather keep you in the Sterling family even from a distance. Think about it. Let me know by Monday." As I hung up, I realized I'd accomplished more in one day toward my own happiness than I had in years of trying to please my parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. It took discovering their true feelings to finally prioritize my own. That evening, I returned home for dinner, watching my parents through new eyes as they discussed their day and asked perfunctory questions about my supposed illness. I answered pleasantly, passed the salad, and excused myself early, claiming fatigue. In my room, I continued preparations, transferring documents to secure cloud storage, researching moving companies, creating new bank accounts my parents couldn't access. With each step, the fog of obligation and guilt that had clouded my judgment for years began to lift, replaced by something unfamiliar but welcome: determination, uncomplicated by the need for approval. 1 week later, my house was officially on the market. Rebecca had worked miracles, arranging professional staging and photography while my parents were out. The listing went live Thursday evening, described as a luxury family home in prestigious neighborhood priced for quick sale. "We'll hold an open house this Sunday," Rebecca informed me. Based on comparable properties and current market conditions, I expect multiple offers by Monday morning. I nodded, scrolling through the listing photos on my laptop. The house looked beautiful, spacious and bright, devoid of the tension that had filled it in recent years. I'll make sure my parents are out during the open house, I said. About that, Rebecca hesitated. Have you told them yet? They'll find out soon enough. Soon enough came that very evening. I arrived home from work to find Dad standing in the driveway, arms crossed, face thunderous. Beside him, Mom wrung her hands, her expression oscillating between hurt and anger. What the hell is this? Dad demanded, pointing to the for sale sign Rebecca had installed that afternoon. I walked past him, unlocking the front door with steady hands. It's exactly what it looks like. I'm selling the house. They followed me inside, Mom's voice rising to the pitch I remembered from childhood tantrums. You can't just sell our home without discussing it with us first. I set my briefcase down carefully on the entryway table. It's not our home. It's my home. My name is on the deed, the mortgage, and every utility bill. I've made every payment for 4 years. So that gives you the right to throw your own parents out on the street? Dad's face was turning the dangerous shade of red that had intimidated me since childhood. But I wasn't a child anymore. I'm selling a property I own. What you do next is up to you. Mom stepped between us, tears already forming. Sophia, sweetheart, what's gotten into you? Is this about work? Are you under too much stress? This isn't an impulsive decision, I replied, my voice level. The house has been professionally staged and photographed. The listing went live last night. There's an open house scheduled for Sunday. Sunday? Dad sputtered. This Sunday? Where are we supposed to go? I've made reservations for brunch at the Fairmont. My treat. We should be gone from 11 to 3. Mom's tears dried up instantly. You expect us to go to brunch while strangers walk through our home? My home, I corrected again. And yes, that's exactly what I expect. Dad pulled out what he thought was his trump card. I'm calling Jessica. She'll talk sense into you. I shrugged, the gesture so foreign to my usual accommodating body language that they both stared. Call whoever you want. An hour later, we were seated in our living room in a twisted parody of a family meeting. Jessica had arrived with all 3 kids in tow, her husband Brandon trailing behind, looking deeply uncomfortable. The children had been sent to the backyard, leaving the adults to what Dad ominously called sorting this mess out. Sophia, Jessica began, clearly designated as the mediator. I understand you're going through something, but selling the house seems extreme. It's not extreme. It's a practical decision. I'm moving to Portland for a new career opportunity. Brandon, who usually stayed peripheral to family dynamics, spoke up unexpectedly. Portland's got a great market right now. Growing tech sector, outdoor lifestyle, smart move professionally. Dad shot him a glare that could have melted steel. Not helpful, Brandon. Just saying, career-wise it makes sense, Brandon replied with a slight shrug. Mom ignored this tangent. But why so suddenly? Why not give us time to find a place, get organized? The closing will be in 30 days. That's standard. You have a month to make arrangements. A month? Dad exploded. To find an apartment, pack everything. In this rental market? It's impossible. I managed to organize selling a house and relocating to another state in a week, I pointed out. I'm sure between the 2 of you, finding a local apartment in a month is doable. Jessica looked between us, clearly struggling with divided loyalties. Mom, Dad, Sophia does have the right to sell her own house. Maybe we should focus on helping you find a new place. Dad's expression of betrayal would have been comical if it weren't so predictable. You're taking her side? I'm not taking sides. I'm being practical. If the house is for sale, you need somewhere to live. The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents cycling through anger, guilt-tripping, and finally bargaining. Just give us 3 months, Mom pleaded, until after the holidays. The market is hot right now, I replied. Waiting would be financially irresponsible. Dad snorted. Since when do you care about money more than family? The irony of his statement hung in the air between us. If only he knew how his own words about me had set this all in motion. But I held my tongue, refusing to give away the knowledge that fueled my resolve. By Sunday, the tension in the house was suffocating. My parents had shifted to cold silence. a tactic they'd employed throughout my childhood when I disappointed them. We drove to brunch in complete silence, the atmosphere thick with unspoken recriminations. At the Fairmont, I received a text from Rebecca. Incredible turnout, at least 60 parties so far, several very interested buyers. Monday morning brought news that exceeded even Rebecca's optimistic projections. We have 9 offers, she announced when I called from work. The highest is $785,000 all cash, 18-day close, minimal contingencies. Accept it, I said without hesitation. Are you sure? We could counter, maybe push them to $800,000. The speed is more important than squeezing out another $15,000. By the time I returned home that evening, I had a signed purchase agreement and a closing date, July 15th, exactly 2.5 weeks away. The buyers had waived the inspection contingency based on the home's age and condition, requiring only a standard appraisal. Meanwhile, Diana in Portland had found me a perfect apartment, a 2-bedroom with mountain views in a secure building downtown, walking distance to my new office. I can hold it with a deposit, she said. It'll be available July 18th, if that timing works. 3 days after closing, just enough time to drive from Seattle to Portland with whatever possessions I decided to keep. The next phase was sorting and packing. I hired a professional organizer, Angela Martinez, who specialized in downsizing. Think of it as curating your life, she suggested as we stood in my bedroom surveying the accumulated possessions of my adult life. Keep only what serves your new chapter. Together, we created 3 categories: keep, sell, donate, and discard. My wardrobe was ruthlessly edited, the formal business attire of Seattle banking giving way to Portland's more casual tech culture. Furniture that wouldn't fit in my new apartment was consigned to high-end resale shops. Books were boxed for donation to the local library, save for a carefully selected collection I couldn't bear to part with. My colleague Jennifer volunteered to help one weekend, arriving with coffee and an efficient attitude that matched my own. Catherine's in denial, she confided as we wrapped framed photographs in bubble wrap. She keeps telling everyone you'll change your mind before the transfer paperwork goes through. Not a chance, I replied, carefully packing away a photo of my college graduation, the only one where both my parents appeared genuinely proud. Had that been real, or just for the camera? As we worked, memories surfaced of my ex-boyfriend Tyler, who'd never understood my family dynamics. You drop everything whenever they call, he'd complained during our last fight. It's like you're their parent, not the other way around. I'd ended things shortly after, convinced he was being selfish for not understanding my family obligations. Now I wondered if he'd seen what I'd been blind to all along. By the second week, the house was half-packed, my life sorted into neat labeled boxes. The Portland job offer had been formalized with a generous relocation package and starting salary that exceeded my Seattle position. Catherine had reluctantly processed my transfer request, extracting a promise that I'd train my replacement before leaving. My parents' efforts to find their own place had been half-hearted at best. Dad made a show of circling apartment listings in the newspaper, but complained that everything was too expensive or too small. Mom mentioned moving in with Jessica temporarily with increasing frequency, despite Jessica's obvious reluctance during our family calls. 3 days before closing, I returned home to find them waiting for me in the living room, Jessica beside them looking uncomfortable. The formal arrangement of furniture, them on the sofa, a chair positioned opposite, made it clear this was an intervention. "We need to talk," Dad began, using the authoritative tone that had once sent me scrambling to please him. "This has gone far enough." "Far enough," I repeated, setting my purse down but remaining standing. "Sophia, please sit down," Mom said, patting the chair they'd positioned like a defendant's dock. "We're worried about you." Jessica nodded, though her expression was conflicted. "We just want to understand what's happening. This isn't like you." I sat crossing my legs and folding my hands in my lap, the poised professional even in the midst of family drama. What exactly isn't like me? Making a career decision? Moving to a new city? Millions of people do these things every day. Abandoning your family without warning, Dad clarified, his jaw tight. Throwing your parents out of their home. It's not abandonment, it's relocation. And it's not their home, it's mine. Jessica winced at my tone, but I continued. I've given you 3 weeks' notice, which is more than fair. Fair? Mom's voice rose, tears already gathering. After everything we've done for you? The question hung in the air, so absurd I almost laughed. Everything they'd done for me? What exactly did they think that entailed? Mom? Jessica interjected gently. Maybe we should focus on solutions. Sophia has made her decision about the house. Dad wasn't ready to concede. No daughter who respected her parents would do this. It's selfish and ungrateful. I expected better from you, Sophia. You've always been a disappointment, but this takes it to a new level. There it was. Disappointment. The same word he'd used with Robert, not knowing I could hear. The final thread of my restraint snapped. A disappointment? I repeated, my voice deadly calm. Like when you told Robert I was nothing, a failure who should have never been born. The color drained from Dad's face. Beside him, Mom went completely still. That's right, I continued, my eyes locked on his. 3 weeks ago, you forgot to properly end your video call. I heard everything. Every word about how pathetic I am, how embarrassed you are to live with me, how Jessica is your real achievement, while I'm just the ATM funding your comfortable retirement. Jessica's gasp was audible. Dad, what is she talking about? Dad recovered quickly, his expression shifting to defensive indignation. You were eavesdropping on a private conversation. I came home early to share good news about a client presentation. You were broadcasting your conversation through the whole house because you can't operate video call software properly. You clearly misunderstood, Mom interjected, reaching for my hand. I pulled away before she could touch me. Whatever you think you heard. I heard you too, Mom, I interrupted. Joining in about how cold I am, how focused on money and status, how you're tired of walking on eggshells around me and pretending to be interested in my work stories, how the expensive Christmas watches I bought you were tasteless, how you're both just playing the game until you can afford to move near Jessica. Mom's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. Beside her, Dad switched tactics. Everyone vents sometimes, Sophia. You're taking things out of context. Of course, we appreciate everything you do for us. Do you? I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd prepared for this moment, though I hadn't been sure it would come. Let me show you what everything looks like. I opened the folder and removed a spreadsheet, sliding it across the coffee table toward them. This is a complete accounting of what I've spent supporting you both for the past 4 years. I turned to face them directly. Mortgage payments, $156,000. Utilities, $18,400. Groceries and household expenses, $32,800. Car insurance, cell phone bills, medical expenses not covered by Medicare, $24,600. Home repairs and improvements, $28,900. I flipped to a second page, plus the loans that were never repaid. Dad's new truck after the bankruptcy, $38,000. Mom's cosmetic dental work, $9,200. The Hawaii vacation last winter, $7,800. Jessica's children's private school application fees that you insisted on covering, $4,200. Jessica's head snapped up. What? They told me you offered to pay those. I did, after they pressured me, just like I've been secretly funding your children's college accounts for the past 3 years. $600 a month, automatically transferred. That's $21,600 they haven't bothered to tell you about. The look of shock on her face confirmed what I'd suspected. Our parents had taken credit for my financial contributions to her children's future, just as they'd taken credit for my success when it suited them. You've been supporting us, yes, Dad acknowledged grudgingly, but that's what family does. We raised you, put you through college. My scholarships and student loans put me through college, I corrected, which I paid off myself. As for raising me, let's talk about that. I turned to Jessica. Did you know Dad missed my high school graduation because you had a dance recital the same day? Jessica frowned. That's not how they explained it to me. They said you told them not to come because you were embarrassed about Dad's business troubles. Of course that's what they told you, I shook my head. Years of collected slights and dismissals, all rewritten to protect the golden child narrative. This is ridiculous. Mom stood abruptly. We've always loved both our daughters equally. Really? Then why did you tell Robert that Jessica is Dad's real achievement, while I'm just a pathetic workaholic? Why did you spend more on Jessica's prom dress than you did on my entire college dorm setup? Why have you attended every single one of her children's birthday parties but forgot mine for 3 years running?" The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stared at the financial spreadsheet, seemingly unable to dispute the concrete evidence of my support. Mom had given up on tears and was now looking at me with something close to hatred. Her mask of maternal concern completely dropped. "I don't expect answers," I continued, gathering the papers and returning them to my bag. "I don't even want them anymore. What I want is for you to understand exactly why I'm leaving. It's not about the money. It's about decades of emotional manipulation and favoritism. It's about discovering that the people I've sacrificed everything for see me as nothing but a convenient resource." I turned to Jessica, whose expression had shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. "I don't blame you. You didn't create this dynamic. They did. But I'm done with it." "What about us?" Dad finally asked, gesturing between himself and Mom. "Where are we supposed to go in 3 days?" "That's not my problem anymore. I've accepted a position with Cascade Financial in Portland. I'm leaving the day after closing." "You can't just abandon us," Mom insisted, panic replacing anger. "We're your parents." "Being a parent is more than biology. It's support, encouragement, and love, things I've given you far more of than I've ever received." I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "You can stay until closing day. After that, you're on your own." Jessica rose as well, her expression troubled. "Mom, Dad, maybe you could stay with us for a little while, until you find a place." The speed with which they pivoted to their backup plan was almost impressive. Mom's tears turned on cue as she embraced Jessica. "Oh, sweetheart, we wouldn't want to impose." "It's fine," Jessica said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "The guest room is small, but it's just temporary." I caught her eye over Mom's shoulder, and for the first time in our adult lives, I felt a moment of true connection with my sister, a shared recognition of the manipulation we'd both been subject to in different ways. She gave me a small, sad nod. As they discussed logistics, I quietly left the room. There was nothing more to say. The truth had been laid bare, the decision made. In 3 days, I would close this chapter of my life and begin writing a new one on my own terms, without the weight of unrequited family obligation dragging me down. Closing day arrived with a sense of finality that was both terrifying and liberating. I met Rebecca at the title company's office, signing document after document until my hand cramped. When the final paper was processed, she handed me a cashier's check for $731,200, the sale price minus the remaining mortgage balance and closing costs. "Congratulations," she said, shaking my hand. "Most of my clients are emotional on closing day, but you look relieved." "I am," I admitted. "It's a fresh start." My parents had moved out the previous day, reluctantly relocating to Jessica's guest room. "Just until we find the perfect place," they'd insisted. They'd taken far more than their personal belongings. Kitchen appliances I'd purchased, the new patio furniture, even bathroom fixtures that should have stayed with the house. I let it go. The material things seemed insignificant compared to the emotional baggage I was leaving behind. After the closing, I returned to the empty house for one final walkthrough. Each room held memories, some good, many now tainted by the knowledge of my parents' true feelings. The kitchen where I'd prepared countless family meals, the dining room where I'd endured subtle criticisms disguised as concern, the home office where I'd overheard the conversation that changed everything. I was standing in my old bedroom when Jessica arrived alone. "I thought you might be here," she said, hovering in the doorway. "The kids are with Brandon's mom. I wanted to help with any last-minute things." "I'm all packed," I replied, gesturing to the bare room. "The movers took everything yesterday," she nodded, stepping further inside. "I'm sorry, Sophia, about all of it. I had no idea they felt that way about you." "I know. It's not your fault. But I benefited from it," she acknowledged, surprising me with her insight. "My whole life, I got the praise, the attention, the support. I never questioned why. Because it was normal to you. Why would you question it?" We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of shared history between us. "Are we going to stay in touch?" she finally asked. "After you move?" "I'd like to," I said honestly. You and the kids. We can video chat, figure out a new relationship without them in the middle. She smiled tentatively. I'd like that too. Together, we walked through the house one last time, locking doors and closing blinds. At the front entrance, I handed her the spare key for the buyers. Take care of yourself in Portland, she said, embracing me awkwardly. We'd never been physically affectionate siblings. Take care of yourself with them, I replied. Don't let them do to you what they did to me. Maya was waiting in her car when I emerged, ready for our 2-day road trip to Portland. We'd planned it as an adventure, a cleansing journey from my old life to the new. Ready? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. More than you know. As Seattle receded in the rearview mirror, the tension I'd carried for years began to dissolve. We crossed state lines singing along to playlists, stopping at quirky roadside attractions, talking about everything and nothing. With each mile, I felt lighter, more myself. Portland welcomed us with stunning mountain views and clear blue skies. My new apartment was everything Diana had promised, modern, spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the distant Cascades. The furnishings I'd kept fit perfectly, and what was missing could be replaced in time. This place is gorgeous, Maya declared as we uncorked a bottle of champagne that first night. To new beginnings, I toasted. To freedom, she countered, clinking her glass against mine. Maya stayed for a week, helping me settle in before flying back to Seattle. Her departure was bittersweet, my only connection to my old life returning to it. But I wasn't alone for long. My new position at Cascade Financial began the following Monday. The team welcomed me warmly, and the work itself was engaging. Similar enough to my previous role to leverage my expertise, different enough to present new challenges. My boss, Michael Rodriguez, had a management style that emphasized results over FaceTime, a refreshing change from Seattle's more traditional banking culture. 1 month into my new life, I was establishing routines: morning runs through Forest Park, weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge, evenings spent reading or exploring my new city. My apartment was taking shape, becoming a true reflection of my tastes without accommodation for anyone else's preferences. The phone call from Jessica came on a Sunday afternoon. "How's Portland?" she asked after pleasantries were exchanged. "It's wonderful," I replied truthfully. "How are things there?" Her hesitation told me everything before she spoke. "Challenging. Mom and Dad are still with us. They've looked at a few apartments but always find reasons why they won't work. Let me guess. Too small, too expensive, wrong neighborhood?" "Exactly," she sighed. "And they're not contributing to household expenses. Brandon is getting frustrated." "They did the same thing to me," I reminded her gently. "It's a pattern." "I know, She paused. "I feel guilty even complaining to you about it after what you went through." "Don't. We're both their daughters, just in different roles." After we hung up, I felt a momentary pang of guilt. Had I simply shifted their burden from my shoulders to Jessica's? But I reminded myself that Jessica had Brandon, a partnership to help bear the weight. And unlike me, she'd been raised with the tools to set boundaries, having seen them modeled by our parents her entire life. That night, I noticed a letter in my mail pile with Mom's distinctive handwriting. I set it aside, not yet ready to read whatever justifications or manipulations it contained. Instead, I went out onto my balcony, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in memory, I was sleeping through the night, uninterrupted by anxiety dreams or insomnia. My appetite had returned, and with it a few pounds that softened the gaunt look stress had carved into my face. Colleagues commented on my energy, my creativity, the fresh perspectives I brought to meetings. The following week, I received a video call request from Catherine. Curious, I accepted. "Portland agrees with you," she observed, studying me through the screen. "You look well." "I am well," I confirmed. "How are things at Sterling?" "Productive. Your replacement is working out, though she lacks your attention to detail." She paused, her expression turning serious. "I should mention that your parents contacted the firm asking for your new address." My stomach tightened. "What did you tell them?" "That it's against company policy to disclose personal information about employees. They were quite insistent, your father especially." "Thank you for not sharing it." Catherine nodded. "I gathered there were personal reasons for your relocation. It's not my business, but if you ever need anything." "I appreciate that." I said, touched by her unexpected support. After the call, I messaged Jessica, asking her to reinforce with our parents that contacting my workplace was unacceptable. Her response was immediate. Already handled it. They won't do it again. Perhaps the most unexpected development in my new life was my neighbor, Alex Chen. We'd met in the elevator my first week, both carrying grocery bags from the organic market down the street. He was a software engineer, transplanted from San Francisco 2 years earlier, with an easy smile and no expectations. Our friendship developed naturally. Casual conversations in the lobby, evolving into coffee at the corner cafe, then hiking excursions on weekends. He didn't press for details about my past, accepting my vague explanations about wanting a change of scenery. In return, I didn't question the sadness that sometimes flickered across his features when certain topics arose. 6 months after my arrival in Portland, I stood on my balcony watching the first snowfall of the season, a cup of hot chocolate warming my hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Snow day hike tomorrow? The trails look magical after fresh powder." I smiled, typing back my acceptance. Behind me, my apartment glowed with warmth. Smaller than my Seattle home, but truly mine in every way that mattered. On the wall hung a painting I'd commissioned of the Seattle skyline, my way of honoring the city that had shaped me without being defined by it. I was not the same person who had overheard that devastating conversation 8 months ago. That Sophia had been defined by her role as the dutiful daughter, the family ATM, the responsible one. This Sophia was defined by her own choices, her own priorities, her own joy. The path to this freedom hadn't been easy or clean. There were still moments of doubt, flashes of the old guilt, but they were growing fainter, overwhelmed by the evidence that I had made the right choice for myself, and perhaps, ultimately, for everyone involved. December arrived with a flurry of snow and holiday decorations throughout Portland. My professional life had exceeded all expectations. 4 months after joining Cascade Financial, I'd been promoted to senior analyst, managing a team of 5 and reporting directly to the regional director. My colleagues respected my expertise, and clients appreciated my straightforward approach to financial planning. Personally, I'd found my footing in this new city. My apartment purchase had been finalized in November, using a portion of the proceeds from the Seattle house sale. At 1,200 square feet, it was the perfect size for one person who valued quality over quantity. My friendship with Alex had deepened into something more. Though we were taking things slowly, both of us carried baggage from previous relationships. His from a difficult divorce, mine from the complex entanglement of family dysfunction. We'd agreed to be intentional about our connection, building a foundation of honesty and respect before defining what we might become to each other. Every Saturday morning, I video called with Jessica and her children. These conversations had become a highlight of my week, a way to maintain family bonds that were healthy and reciprocal. Her oldest, Connor, was applying to colleges and often sought my advice on financial planning for education. The younger two, Emma and Lucas, simply enjoyed showing me their latest art projects or soccer trophies. My parents, meanwhile, had made multiple attempts to reconnect on their terms. Email forwards with passive-aggressive subject lines like, "In case you're interested in your family," arrived regularly. Phone calls came on holidays and birthdays, filled with subtle guilt trips and thinly veiled criticisms of my abandonment. I'd finally read Mom's letter, finding exactly what I'd expected, a masterclass in manipulation disguised as maternal concern. "We only want what's best for you," she'd written. "Families should stay together, especially as parents age. Your father and I aren't getting any younger." Dr. Foster, who continued our therapy sessions via video, helped me navigate these boundary violations without falling back into old patterns. "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation," she reminded me. "You can release the anger without allowing them back into a position where they can harm you." As Christmas approached, I faced a decision about holiday plans. Jessica had invited me to visit Seattle, offering her home as neutral territory for a potential family gathering. Alex had suggested a ski weekend in Mount Hood as an alternative. A third option beckoned as well, hosting my own small celebration in Portland with local friends I'd made through work and my hiking group. "What does your gut tell you?" Dr. Foster asked during our session. That I'm not ready to see them, I admitted. The thought of sitting across a table from Dad, pretending everything is fine, I can't do it yet. Then don't. Your healing timeline is your own. I chose option 3, decorating my apartment with tasteful but festive touches. A small tree in the corner, twinkling lights along the balcony railing, handmade wreaths I'd created at a community workshop. I invited 10 people for Christmas Eve dinner, including Alex and Michael from work with his wife. The day before the gathering, my doorbell rang. A delivery person handed me a package from Jessica. Inside were handmade ornaments from the children, along with a card that brought tears to my eyes. "We miss you, but we understand. Building your own traditions is important too. Love you, sis." I hung the ornaments prominently on my tree, photographing them to send with my thanks. As I was about to put my phone away, it rang. A Seattle number I recognized immediately. Dad. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. "Hello, Sophia." His voice sounded older, smaller somehow. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Dad," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Your mother and I," he began, then cleared his throat. "We're in our own place now, a small apartment near Jessica. That's good. I'm glad to hear it." An awkward silence stretched between us. I waited, refusing to fill it as I once would have. "Things have been difficult," he finally continued. "Financially, the rental market here is worse than we expected." And there it was, the real purpose of the call. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said simply. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear his internal struggle, pride wrestling with need, expectation battling with the new reality. "Sophia, I know things ended badly, but we're your parents. We need—" "Dad," I interrupted gently but firmly, "I'm not in a position to provide financial support anymore. My life has changed. My expenses and priorities are different now." "But family helps family," he insisted, the familiar guilt tactic emerging. "Yes, they do. And that help can take many forms. I'm happy to stay in touch, to rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect, but my financial support is no longer an option." The silence that followed told me everything about his true priorities. When he spoke again, his voice was tight with suppressed anger. "I see. Well, Merry Christmas then." "Merry Christmas, Dad," I repeated, ending the call before he could continue. I stood on my balcony afterward, watching snow fall gently on the city below. 8 months ago, that conversation would have left me devastated, racked with guilt and self-doubt. Now I felt only a calm certainty that I had made the right decision, not just for my financial well-being, but for my emotional health. Christmas Eve arrived with perfect Oregon clarity, brilliant blue skies contrasting with snow-covered peaks in the distance. My apartment filled with delicious aromas as I prepared dinner, something I'd once done out of obligation but now enjoyed as creative expression. Alex arrived early to help, moving around my kitchen with comfortable familiarity. "Your dad called again?" he asked when I mentioned the conversation, trying the direct approach this time. I confirmed, checking the roast in the oven. At least he was honest about wanting money. "And you're okay with setting that boundary?" I considered the question seriously. "Yes. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm making choices based on what's right for me, not what others expect or demand." He smiled, the expression warming his eyes. "That's what I admire about you, Sophia, your courage to redefine yourself." As my guests arrived, bringing wine and desserts and holiday cheer, I realized I'd created something precious here. A chosen family built on genuine connection rather than obligation. We laughed and shared stories, exchanged small gifts, celebrated the season with joy, uncomplicated by past grievances or hidden agendas. After everyone had gone home, Alex lingered, helping me clean up despite my protests that it could wait until morning. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small, wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Not exactly a Christmas gift, more of a new chapter gift. Inside was a beautiful compass, its brass case engraved with mountains and stars. "For someone who found her true north," he explained, "who had the courage to navigate by her own stars." My phone rang before I could respond, my parents calling for their annual Christmas check-in. In previous years, I would have immediately answered, abandoning whatever I was doing to fulfill my filial duty. This time, I looked at Alex, at the compass in my hand, at the home I'd created for myself. "I'll call them back tomorrow," I decided, silencing the ringer. Tonight is for new beginnings. As I stood on my balcony later that night, Alex's arm around my shoulders, watching the city lights twinkle beneath a canopy of stars, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The journey from Seattle to Portland had been far more than geographical. It had been a reclamation of self, a declaration of worth, a lesson in the difference between obligation and love. I had sold a house worth $750,000, but what I gained in return was priceless. The knowledge that I deserved better, the strength to create boundaries, and the freedom to build a life that honored my own heart. 3 months later, as spring arrived in Portland with its famous cherry blossoms and gentle rain, I received unexpected news. Jessica called on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and resolve I'd never heard before. "I did it," she said without preamble. "I told them they had to move out." What happened? Brandon gave me an ultimatum. He said either they go or he goes. And honestly, Sophia, I couldn't blame him. They've been here 7 months, contributing nothing, criticizing everything. Last week, Mom rearranged my kitchen without asking, and Dad told Connor his college choices were impractical and expensive. I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication, sympathy for Jessica, and a deep sadness that it had come to this. "How did they take it?" Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. "About as well as you'd expect. Accusations, tears, the full guilt trip. Mom said I was heartless, just like you. Dad accused me of being ungrateful and materialistic. I'm sorry you had to go through that." "Don't be. You were right, Sophia, about all of it. I just couldn't see it when I was the favorite." She paused. "They're looking for a senior living community now, something they can actually afford on Social Security and Dad's small pension. That's probably for the best." "It is. And Sophia, I want you to know that I've been putting money into the college accounts too now, the ones you started. I never thanked you for that, but I should have." After we hung up, I felt a closure I hadn't expected. My parents would be fine. They'd have each other, a roof over their heads, and the dignity that comes from living within their means. Jessica would be fine too, with her marriage intact and her children protected from the toxic dynamics that had shaped our childhood. And I was more than fine. I was thriving. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of Cascade Financial's Portland office, presenting to the board of directors. At 29, I was being considered for promotion to vice president, the youngest in the company's history. The numbers speak for themselves, I concluded, clicking through the final slide of my presentation. Our client retention rate has increased by 32% since implementing the new advisory protocols. Revenue is up 41% year over year. The applause was genuine, enthusiastic. After the meeting, Michael pulled me aside. "Congratulations, VP Rivera," he said with a grin. "The board was unanimous. The promotion is effective immediately." That evening, Alex and I celebrated at our favorite restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. As we toasted with champagne, I thought about how far I'd traveled, not just geographically, but emotionally and professionally. "Penny for your thoughts," Alex said, noting my contemplative expression. "Just thinking about how different my life is now compared to 2 years ago. Any regrets?" I considered the question seriously. "None. For the first time in my life, I'm living for myself, making decisions based on what's right for me, not what others expect." He raised his glass again. "To living authentically." "To freedom," I countered, echoing Maya's toast from that first night in Portland. As I sat there, successful in my career, surrounded people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, I realized something profound. The little girl who had desperately sought her father's approval, who had measured her worth by her utility to others, was finally at peace. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to walk away. To refuse to participate in dynamics that diminish your spirit, to choose your own happiness over others' expectations. My father had called me a disappointment, a failure who should never have been born. But in trying to destroy me with his words, he had actually set me free. Free to discover my own worth, to build relationships based on mutual respect, to create a life that reflected my values rather than their demands. The house I sold was just wood and brick and glass. What I built in its place, my independence, my self-respect, my authentic relationships, those were the real treasures. And unlike the house, no one could ever take them away from me. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your parents immediately or taken a similar approach? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. And if this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding the courage to choose yourself. Until next time, remember that you deserve relationships built on love and respect, not obligation and manipulation.